Good morning. I'm Paul Joyce, Deputy Director for Further Education and Skills at OfSTED. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm delighted to be contributing to your colloquium this morning. I'm sure this event, along with the many other events and initiatives going on up and down the country, will make a real contribution to sharing ideas that lead on improved provision in GCSE Maths and English. Let me start by saying that OfSTED does understand the challenges that providers face. We do understand the scale of the task. A few years ago, most providers had a handful of learners undertaking GCSE Maths and English courses, and now most colleges have hundreds, and in a few cases over 1,000. And of course, a similar growth in functional skills provision has stretched you even further. So we do understand the challenges you face, ranging from finding sufficiently high quality teachers to the logistical headaches caused by trying to timetable hundreds of students to fit English and Maths lessons around their main qualifications. We did publish a good practice case study last year, which covered the strategies employed by 4 colleges to cope with the increase in Maths and English provision. You can find these on OfSTED's Good Practice website, and copies are available in your venues this morning. As you will know, the current focus on English and Maths stemmed from Alison Wolf's report in 2011, and particular her observation that only 4% of the cohort, over 100,000 16-year-olds who had not achieved GCSE grade C or higher by the time they left school, had done so by the age of 19. Although this figure has crept up over the last 4 years, it is still shockingly low and supports the condition of funding that now requires all those with a grade D to take GCSE courses. Whether we like it or not, GCSE grade C or above has currency with employers, with higher education providers, and with the general public. For many jobs and for further training, GCSE grade C is a requirement. For various reasons that I do not intend to dwell upon, alternative qualifications are perceived as inferior, and GCSE grades below C are not viewed as a good pass. So today I'm going to focus on GCSE and start by making some observations on inspection findings over the last 18 months or so. Up to September 2015, when we inspected and graded subject areas, it was apparent that English and Maths grades were systematically lower than grades in other subjects. Since September 2016, and under the new inspection framework, you will be aware that we don't grade subjects, but provision types instead. So English and Maths has largely been incorporated into the inspection of study programmes, as they constitute a key strand of this work. You won't be surprised to hear that the grades for study programmes under the current framework are lower than those for other provision types. So for example, grades for apprenticeships and for adult learning programmes are significantly higher than those for study programmes. In inspections carried out so far, only around 40% of study programme grades have been good or better, compared to well over 60% for other provision types. It's also worth saying that the quality of English and Maths provision will have an impact on the key judgment grades, on leadership and management, personal development, behaviour and welfare, teaching, learning and assessment, and outcomes for learners. Unfortunately, this impact is often negative. So what lies behind the relatively poor inspection outcomes for Maths and English, both as subjects and as key components of study programmes? Well, you won't be surprised that GCSE results are important. Most providers struggle to move enough learners up from a grade D to a grade C, with the national rate around 35% in 2014-15, and most providers with large numbers are often well below that national figure. And unfortunately, inspectors often report weak teaching, learning and assessment. Lessons are often mundane and don't enthuse learners. Learning is not tailored to the gaps in individual learners' knowledge. Attendance is frequently poor, and too few learners practice their skills outside the classroom. But I want to focus mainly on leadership. After all, it is leaders who are responsible and accountable for securing high quality provision. It may be useful to make a distinction between strategic leadership and operational leadership. Although the two are related, strategic leadership is about how effectively governors and leaders articulate a clear strategy for improving maths and English and put in place the structures and processes to bring this about. Operational leadership is more about the management of the strategy, making sure that on the ground learners benefit from well-organised, high-quality provision. So what does inspection tell us about strategic leadership? Well, where providers are doing well or improving rapidly in GCSE provision, governors and senior leaders are setting the tone. Governors recognise the importance of GCSE English and Maths and hold senior leaders to account by requesting frequent reports on progress. Such reports may, for example, include updates on attendance, staff training, the quality of teaching, and the progress learners are making from their starting points. The quality of teaching and progress from their starting points are critical features that governors do need to ask senior managers about. This ensures that both senior leaders and operational managers are kept on their toes and that the information provided to governors is accurate and up to date. Governors are responsible for carefully monitoring all aspects of the provision. In the same providers, it is usually the case that a senior leader, for example in a college, a vice principal, has direct responsibility for English and Maths and directly line manages those responsible for coordinating and improving GCSE provision. And it's leaders who have to set that vision. Governors and senior leaders have a duty to persuade all staff and learners of the importance of English and Maths, not just because they have no choice in whether they take these subjects, but because of the moral and educational imperative of ensuring that all learners have the opportunity to succeed in the future that eludes many of those who do not reach the grade C benchmark. Critically, this persuasion also needs to extend to the parents and carers of students on study programmes, so that you can get their support in overcoming some students' reluctance. By contrast, inspectors have reported that in a minority of colleges, governors have not even heard of study programmes, do not recognise the importance of English and Maths GCSE, and in some instances receive reports that cover A star to C grades rather than A star to C grades. Such reports invariably paint an over-optimistic picture of the quality of provision. Sometimes staff with direct responsibility for English and Maths are at a relatively junior level and report to middle managers rather than a senior leader. Let's now look at operational leadership. Well, where provision is good or where progress is being made, Maths and English GCSE are well organised and well led. We came across a lot of providers in the autumn term of 2014 and to a lesser extent in the autumn term of 2015, where what inspectors observed could only be described as chaos. Learners did not know what English and Maths classes they were meant to attend. Allocations to GCSE and functional skills routes were riddled with errors, and group sizes varied ridiculously. In one example, in a college, from 5 learners in one class to over 40 learners in another. Sometimes there was no teacher present at a timetabled session. Well, good operational management will overcome these factors and will ensure they don't occur. For example, some providers are now timetabling learners for their English and Maths classes to fit around their main vocational qualification. It is critical from the start of term that learners know exactly what English and Maths classes they are following and where they have to go and when. Without this, your chances of maintaining high attendance and retention rates are very low. In one sense, the new condition of funding has made life easier. Whatever any initial assessment shows, you know that all those with a grade D have to be allocated to a GCSE class. And good operational managers do all they can to ensure that learners on GCSE courses benefit from the very best available teachers. This means, for example, in colleges that deliver A-levels, not allowing the best teachers to cherry-pick their timetables. Good operational leadership also means ensuring that enough timetabled hours are allocated to GCSE, that the classrooms and resources used are of the same high quality and just as stimulating as those used on learners' main vocational programmes, and that the aspirations for what learners can achieve are manifest. For example, by insisting that meaningful homework is set, submitted and marked. One inspector told me he had seen an English lesson where the teacher started off by saying, "I know this is boring and you'll hate it, but we have to do it." Well, I don't really need to say any more. I'm not saying that it's easy to infuse learners who have been switched off by maths and English by possibly a poor school experience, but it seriously can be done. I started off by saying that OfSTED does not underestimate the challenges you face, and the biggest of these is that of securing enough high quality teachers, particularly for GCSE. I know the sector, with the support of stakeholders such as the ETF, is doing all it can to recruit and train the specialist teachers needed. A hard task indeed in face of the challenges from schools, who often pay more and give longer holidays. I also know that many of you have invested much time and effort in training vocational teachers to embed English and Maths into the curriculum, and sometimes to teach discrete functional skills and GCSE classes. I wanted to finish by passing on a few observations on the leadership of teaching based on inspection findings. The leadership of teaching is crucial. Inspection evidence shows that creative and innovative approaches to GCSE teaching can bring about substantial improvements in attendance rates and in results. But too often we're seeing dull lessons, learners that are not motivated. Often they are all doing the same task. Inevitably, some find it too easy and others too hard. More often than not, learners spend most of their time doing worksheets, especially in GCSE maths lessons. Many learners are frequently absent from their English and maths lessons, and often teachers' expectations of the amount of independent study that learners should do are either too low or non-existent. When we feed these observations back to leaders and managers, it often becomes clear that they have not had a close look themselves. This strikes us as negligent and a failure of leadership. But we have also seen some fabulous teaching. It often starts off with good marketing. Teachers motivate learners by persuading them that their life depends on improving their GCSE grade, and then deliver lessons that capture their interest and make them recognise that maths and English isn't as bad as they thought it was. We've even seen students that really enjoy their lessons. What characterises these better lessons and courses is that teachers don't try to deliver all the content in exactly the same way that has already been done in schools. Instead, the creative teacher finds out for each individual learner what is preventing them from succeeding. Which bits of the specification do they find hard and why? Good teachers recognise that there is not much to be gained by going over and over things that learners already understand. They can reinforce this by practicing in their own time. Rather, they find out what each learner is struggling with, for example by going over previous exam papers and focusing most of the lesson time on aspects that learners do struggle with. I know that such personalised learning is not easy, and I'm not pretending for a moment that every learner in a class of 20 can be given discrete individual work. But great teachers do find ways of supporting each student to conquer the specific barriers that they face. One inspector told me that he had talked to a student who said, "I thought I was hopeless at maths, but my teacher convinced me I wasn't. Just that there were a few things I didn't get, particularly algebra." He told me that I could get a grade C, and now I'm determined to prove him right. Doing all this successfully is of course partly related to the amount of timetable time that learners have devoted to English and maths. The greater the timetabled allocation, the more flexibility you have, for example, to deliver a mix of taught sessions and workshops. I want to conclude by reiterating the central message of my remarks. If your English and maths provision is not good enough, please don't blame your learners. That's far too easy, and it entirely misses the point. And don't blame your hard-pressed teachers, as long as they are trying their best. Instead, ask yourselves what you, as governors, leaders and managers, need to do to ensure that all learners benefit from well-organised provision and high-quality teaching that give them every chance of success. Thank you very much for listening.